Welcome back to another edition of the NBA Fantasy Baller DFS edition, brought to you by ResearchFantasy.com for Monday, March 13th, 2017. And let's talk what happened yesterday, and that was we were 3 for 3 on guys that you wanted in your lineup. I think if you were able to put all of these guys in your lineup, regardless of the site you played on, you probably had a good night. The three I am referring to was Hassan Whiteside, who finished over 50 fantasy points, Kristaps Porzingis, who finished between 44 and 48, and Damian Lillard, who finished between 46 and 51. So those were our core three plays for a 5-game slate. Turned out very, very, very nicely for us, and especially since we had some good value plays, which we'll touch on in the next video, that did well for us. So hoping to keep that momentum going in this video tonight, and I think that we've got some good plays. I will say, for me, this slate, I think this is one of those slates that's going to take a couple hours to develop for me. When I'm looking at it, I just don't have guys that I'm absolutely in love with. Maybe a few, and a lot of it is situational based off of the specific site that I want to use them on. So I'm sure as the day goes on, Kawhi Leonard is somebody who has a big piece in how a lot of this slate will go. If he's active, I think that you really want to look at that Hawks Spurs game because it's going to be highly competitive. If he's not, you're looking at a really tough situation to want to roster the Hawks in, but we'll get to that a little bit in a second here. I just want to run through what our model says, give you the names of some people that our model spits out as being good plays in the non-value tier category. Dirk Nowitzki, Andrew Wiggins, Marvin Williams, Tyreek Evans, Ricky Rubio, Kemba Walker, Harrison Barnes, DeMar DeRozan, Jimmy Butler, Chris Middleton, Dennis Schroeder, Greg Monroe, Kawhi Leonard if active and only in tournaments, Paul Millsap, Gordon Hayward, Chris Paul, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis specifically is a very intriguing tournament play, under 10K on DraftKings, going up against a Memphis Grizzlies defense that's perceived to be a world beater. You're probably looking at lower ownership because people will just say, well, I wouldn't even play him. Well, this is a guy we've seen put up 70 burgers, and even though he's not on our list today, anybody who can potentially come up with a triple-double is someone we need to look at, especially if we think we might be able to get him at 5% or less ownership in tournaments. So I just want to throw that out there. Our top 3 plays tonight. Let's start with John Wall, point guard, Washington Wizards, 18-3 fantasy draft, 10-7 FanDuel, 10-2 DraftKings. I really struggled to find a high-priced guy that I really love. I do like Karl Anthony Towns. Our model isn't exactly very favorable on him, and at this point it takes a lot for him to hit value. But the same thing can be said about John Wall. I think that the matchup is something I do like with John Wall. I think that this Wizards-Timberwolves game should be really close. It should be a fun game to watch just from a basketball perspective. And Wall has come through over the last several games with fantasy outings. 56, 53, 51.25, 61, 43, 60, 38, 53. So you see that it's a pretty safe floor. I mean, he's only dipped below 40 one time, but he's gone above 50, the vast majority of times, including a couple of 60-point games. A double-double is certainly in play here against a Timberwolves team that isn't the fastest in the league, but does give up a lot of fantasy points for the time that they're playing on the floor. So if I'm going with one of the higher-priced guys, maybe more cash games than tournaments, but I'll still have a good amount of him in tournaments, it's going to be John Wall tonight. Moving on from there, let's talk about someone who I think is a safe play, just misses our value tier tonight, and that's Gary Harris, shooting guard of the Denver Nuggets up against the Los Angeles Lakers. 11-5 on Fantasy Draft, 5,600 FanDuel, 5,800 DraftKings. He's seeing minutes in the mid-30s. Could see a few more tonight with Jameer Nelson and Wilson Chandler, both possibly missing the game. It's tough to say right now what way it's going to go. Either way, if Nelson misses, you'll probably see Harris move from 34 to about 36 minutes as long as the game stays close. I have a funny feeling it's going to. I know that the spread, according to Vegas, doesn't really look like it right now, but sometimes you have to make your own gut calls just based off of what you see. So, yeah, I do think it's going to stay close enough. If Wilson Chandler's out, I think some of the usage shifts to Harris. He's had 30-point games in 3 of his last 4. This is the best matchup he's had at during that time. If he's hitting 3-point shots, you could definitely end up seeing a 40-point outing. You are going to have to deal with high ownership. This is an excellent price to buy into him still. I think my favorite play of the game is going to come from that Atlanta-San Antonio game. Probably a little more specific to DraftKings and FanDuel, and I do have to say I really love the price on Paul Millsap as well. But when I see Dwight Howard, center Atlanta Hawks, priced at 12.3 on Fantasy Draft, 7K on FanDuel, and 6,200 on DraftKings, you get 2 points for a double-double. And I mean, Dwight's a pretty good bet for a double-double. Dwight could have a double-double in this game in the first quarter. I know that David Lee is a pretty good rebounder, but not necessarily against a guy like Dwight Howard. I think that, Howard, there's a lot of concern maybe that Pau Gasol could give him trouble because Pau likes to shoot the threes, but Pau's game isn't dependent on the threes. You're not going to see him posting up at the three-point line because the team's just not going to be able to play that way. So I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities with a lesser class of players on the court for Dwight to come up with blocks, rebounds, points, putbacks. I'm kind of putting his floor, in my mind, at about 35 fantasy points. I think his ceiling could be as high as 50, and at that price, I'm going to go overweight on Dwight Howard, who's typically pretty low owned anyway. People just don't want to roster Dwight Howard. I think they're just sick of the past few years of getting burned when they want to use him. So he's someone who will see his way into a lot of my lineups. That will wrap it up for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tell your friends about how great my variety of basketball-related clothing is, and maybe I have a little bit of knowledge of the sport as well. Make sure to go over to researchfantasy.com, sign up for our NBA mailing list, head over to Facebook, like us there, follow us on Twitter at Research and Win, and join us again tomorrow.